Sometimes old games need a fresh look, but what happens when they become old? I am the Game Collector, and this is Second Opinion Games. And today I look at retro reboots for the PlayStation 1.
Second Opinion Games.
So Asteroids was rebooted as Asteroids, just to keep things confusing. One of the first things you'll be greeted with is some early CGI, and it looks fairly good. Video game companies love to shove this in your face to show you that this is the future of video games, because the early 8-bit and 4-bit days, things just looked like crap and you mostly had to use your imagination. Now that imagination is thrown out the window because we're going to show you everything in your face. And then you get to choose from 3 different ships. Each one has their own pluses and minuses in shields, thrust, and firepower. Personally, I think firepower is the most important here, but thrust is pretty good, because if you don't have some good thrust, well, you're probably not going to make it very far in the game. Shields are a little bit tricky because of how they work. They work on a slight delay, and you also have to hold the shield button down the entire time an asteroid passes through your ship. So it's best to just avoid the asteroids the best you can, rather than have to depend on your shields. So maybe thrust is a little bit better than shields, but it's up to you. The graphics here are about average. It's Asteroids. There's not a whole lot you can do with this, and they kind of know that. That's why they threw in tons of power-ups, like red for mines to put them all over the place, yellows for one-ups because extra ships are always a really good power-up, but my favorite is the greens. This is a gun satellite that sort of orbits your ship. It can be taken out by an asteroid, but it does a terrific job shooting down all of these intergalactic baddies. And I don't mean just the asteroids. There's also UFOs that happen to show up. You know, this is kind of weird with asteroids in general, because they're like 400 miles plus apart in the actual space because of the way space works. So successfully navigating an asteroid field would be super easy. They also mix things up with some ice asteroids. They get bigger after you don't shoot them for a while. And the controls overall are actually confusing. I don't know how they managed to make a freaking asteroids game with confusing controls, because they went from the Atari 2600, where literally there's just a joystick and one button, to now using almost every single button on the PlayStation controller. You also have firing backwards and the hyperspace, which I always forget about until it's the last freaking minute, and then I just blow up rather than press the freaking button on time. Now, your biggest enemy here is the darkness of space itself. Because of the background being so dark, sometimes it's hard to see the asteroids. That's where the problem would probably be in fighting real asteroids, but you probably have some type of radar sensor to be able to point these things out, unlike in this game where you just have your stupid eyes. Overall, this is a good baseline to start off with, and it's a completely average reboot. Up next, we have Arkanoid 2000. That's right, it was the 90s, so putting 2000 at the end of everything was almost a must. And you start off by seeing a giant Easter Island statue head floating around in space and sucks your ship in. I guess that's as good as a storyline as any. Now, there's not really that much you can do with Arkanoid. They did their best. I mean, the graphics-wise are pretty much the same as what you would see on the NES. The music and sound effects have been upgraded decently, and the power-ups are plenty, because that's one of the best parts about this game. I honestly like the lasers that sort of blast things out of your way, but honestly, the game is best when it's on, like, autoplay. You know, when you get the ball in a just right area, and it starts to destroy the different blocks really quickly, and you pretty much don't have to do anything. The bad parts is when there's 1 or 2 blocks left, and it just takes forever for those last sticking blocks to die. Now, one of the things that happens to me all the time when I'm playing this game is what I call the Ole move. That's when, like, a bull's charging at you and you say, "Ole!" and just jump out of the way of the ball and die. And it happens to me quite often. This is a game that really would have been greatly benefited by having paddle controllers, but we have the standard PlayStation controller here, and it does a decent job. Arkanoid 2000 is full of levels that will keep fans of Arkanoid continuously playing, but it does nothing really new to bring in people to this reboot. Next up, we have Space Invaders, and way to keep things simple with just keeping the name Space Invaders. The controls here are really simple. It's just moving left and right and firing. There's also a special button to launch your special weapon. The music here is really sweet, some upbeat techno stuff, and I really like it. The sound effects are also really cool, and there are different motherships that you could shoot down to bring you power-ups like shields and double shot. Other than that, it just looks like Space Invaders to me. When you have a game over, well, you get a sweet CGI explosion because they have to shove that CGI in your face. This just looks and feels a lot like Space Invaders, with really simple controls and even boss battles added in there for good measure. When you lose all your lives, you're dead, and it's game over with no continuing. So you better actually take use of the save feature. After every level, you can save, and if you happen to die on a level, well, I don't recommend saving, instead reloading and then starting that level all over again. So you could then rush through this entire game in almost no time. But it's really not going to be that simple. Remember how I said there was a special weapon? Well, this weapon changes the game entirely. You see, there are different colored UFOs to shoot down, and if you get 4 of them in a row, you get a certain power-up based on that color. It could be firing a missile up to then go right all the way across the screen and destroying everything in sight, or it could just be a straight up vertical thrust, because thrust is really important to destroy everything straight up, or just tons of crazy stuff. Also, the shields are kind of cool here too. They're no longer just useless things that get in the way. You could actually push them up and make ships just run into them, making so that very last ship that is just too hard to shoot can actually be a breeze. This is how you do reboots right, and Space Invaders is a great one. And I have to say, it's one of my favorites on the PlayStation 1. Next up, we have Viewpoint. It's one of those isometrically viewed games, which I really am not a big fan of. You move left and right and collect power-ups, and the most interesting thing about this game is that you have a charge shot. If you're charging, you're not shooting, and if you're not shooting, well, you're probably almost ready to die. Now, sometimes you have to trigger events in the environment in order to progress forward, otherwise you'll run into a wall and die. There are some cool boss battles here, but this game is actually really difficult. I'm not sure if it's the weird isometric view that throws me off here, but I can never seem to do anything in this game. And quite frankly, I think this is a really lazy modern reboot. It doesn't really feel like they changed anything to bring in new people, and people that love the game really probably prefer playing the original. So this is probably one to stay away from. Galaga Destination Earth is next. One of the very first things I usually do when I start up a game is go into the options screen to check out what options are available to me. And I'm someone that likes to play with inverted controls, so I made sure to click that box. And when I started the game, well, it's just an updated version of Galaga, moving left and right as a vertical shooter, shooting down aliens. And I don't understand the vertical controls here. I push left, I go left, I push right, I go right, and I shoot down these alien baddies. Also, collecting a alien ship and using it on your side against the enemies, I don't even have to waste one of my lives doing this. It's just a power-up that's in the game. That's kind of cool. But then, holy crap, is my world ever flipped upside down as it goes into a first-person view. And all of a sudden, I can't control my ship at all. When I push up, I go up instead of being inverted. So that means that they thought inverted was not inverted? Yeah, things were really weird in the 90s with controls like this. You never knew what you're gonna jump into. I really like the way my ship moves in the 3D space, and shooting down aliens is actually quite simple. This is definitely a little bit of a Star Fox killer here, even if most people just passed it aside in the bargain bin. It's a great game, but my world is flipped upside down again, as now it takes on the form of a horizontal shooter. Yeah, it has like everything going on, and again, I'm having a great time with it and shooting down enemies with ease. There's also boss battles in here and different missions, which is probably the thing I like the least about this, because even if you don't die, if you happen to fail one of the missions, you have to start all the way back at the beginning of the level, and some of these levels are really long. Now, Galaga here does a lot of stuff new to bring in new players, and it does plenty of homages to make old players love the game too. So this is actually an A+ game in my book, and it's one that I could strongly recommend picking up. Last up, we have Xevious 3D G+. I guess the people that make the Xevious games didn't think the name was stupid enough. Now, in this game, we have all the different original ones, but we're here to see what the reboot is like. And it just looks like a 3D updated version of an old school shooter, which I honestly thought was kind of crap and boring. It's one of those shooters that you move back and forth shooting stuff and also drop bombs. Now, I'm not opposed to that genre because Legendary Wings and Dragon Spirit are two of my favorite games, but this one I always thought sucked really hard. And thank God they changed something about it. They added auto fire, which was very much appreciated because I didn't want to make my thumbs bleed while I played this stinking game. Now, the graphics and the colors that they chose actually fit the old version perfectly with this new environment, and this is kind of interesting. There's also some power-ups I've never seen before. When you jump into the second level, you're greeted with a whole new level of power-ups, as now I have spaghetti arms that just fly around and shoot everything. Yeah, this is the homing electric shot that you normally see in games, but they made it so darn weak, it's completely useless because you're just gonna die before you can kill anything. It takes a ton of shots to just destroy anything, and it makes it more of a bullet hell shooter, something that this game didn't need to be. Luckily, there's other power-ups like a spread shot and lasers, and this is a really interesting game, but it's certainly not one I want to spend very much money on. Xevious kind of brings in all the people that love the old game, all like 4 of them because the old games are on here. And for the people that want to play a new Xevious game, well, I guess it's kinda here. This is a bit average. Overall, I think I'd rather be playing Galactica or Space Invaders, and all these games are certainly worth getting just because they're in the bargain bin for like $2 or $3, and I'm happy to see these retro reboots get rebooting, and I hope they get rebooted again, only this time keep the names not the same so I could actually play them. But I've had a terrific time playing some old school video games that have been rebooted for a somewhat modern era but left in the reboot stage. as confusing as that is. But overall, that's just my opinion. Thanks for watching. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. I had a great time playing it. And if you thought I missed a couple like Pong the Next Level or Missile Command, well, I already did reviews on those and I didn't want to be a little too redundant, just like the whole genre of retro reboots that are reboots themselves. That's kind of a redundancy thing that just happened. But anyway, hopefully I encouraged all of you guys to play more classic video games. All these ones were dirt cheap, so you'll have no trouble picking them up. And if there was a few out there that I missed, make sure you let me know and maybe I'll do a part 2. So until later, I will see you again, guys.